a couple seconds to let everyone get in, but I was the one who wrote marketing and increasing your audience. So I'll introduce myself and we can go around and say our names and then we can get started. I'm Christopher Hart, I am the Exoplanetary Podcast. We are a science fiction drama podcast, come out once a month. Just to have you go around this way.
I'm Daniel Smiller. I'm a smartphone app developer. I've created audio hyperlinks. So used it in FM radio. What audio hyperlinks do, just like with the hyperlinks on your screen, you touch something, go to content. This allows you to add an audio hyperlink to your podcast, so additional information pops up that the listener can link to, like phone numbers, websites, addresses, so they don't have to type in phone numbers, websites, or addresses. It just pops up on the screen.
Cool. I'm Mac Pritchard. I host a podcast, Find Your Dream Job, and we publish every Wednesday morning. We just had our first anniversary in mid-October, so up to 68 episodes. And we focus on the nuts and bolts of job hunting and career management. It's a 30-minute show.
My name is Todd Bachman. I'm a former executive producer for public radio, and I've done some consulting and I have dabbled in startup development. So.
My turn, I got asked. I missed the beginning. My name is Douglas Dietrich. I produce two podcasts, one about web development that's called Hard Refresh, and then one about jazz music. It's called Beyond Category. So.
My name is Liz Botchagalupi, and I do not have a podcast, and I'm just curious, so that's why I'm here.
My name is Trisha Burns. I'm in the similar boat. I have aspirations for a podcast, but just like to learn and meet new people and see what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Amy Chan. By trade, I do marketing for software, but I'm here because my friend and I are interested in starting a podcast about travel and activities to do in Portland. So trying to learn what we need to do.
My name is Pinky Gonzalez. Just started my first podcast, which airs this Monday. It's called New School VR. It's on the role of virtual and augmented technologies in learning.
Cool. My name is Paul Colligan. Current podcast is called the Podcast Report. I've been doing this for over a decade. I run a company that does podcast production for summer shows. So I actually pay the bills with this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Wrote that podcast book.
Excellent. That's an excellent book.
Oh, thank
It
you.
is.
Well, I'll just start with my problem. It's a problem we all have, wanting to make sure that our podcast gets out to as many people, finding our audience and so forth. I have a lot of ideas of how I want to do that. My particular problem is I have a limited amount of time, limited amount of resources. So I've got a lot of things I want to do and a lot of ideas for how to do it. I don't always necessarily have the time to pursue all of them. So what I'm hoping to do is pick brains and see what's worked for others and see what time constraints others are working under and how they've overcome them. And increase my audience. It's slowly built.
And is the goal increase the audience so one day you hit some number and you do the happy dance, or is
Right.
it increasing the audience so that there's a sponsor who said, I'll come to you when I get to X?
Yeah,
Increase the audience.
There is no one end game for this, which may be part of the problem. Sponsorship would be great if this was a self-sustaining thing. It may be great since I am doing something that is scripted and scripted dramatic podcast, that this led to some other job elsewhere in another media or a paid job doing this for somebody else. That would be nice too. But it may be that I need to focus and pick one particular goal rather than saying, hey, I'll take whatever. I admit that.
I know this is sort of sponsorship, but it seems like it might be helpful. Like, I know for me, when I was more actively in podcasts and stuff, this was on the early age, so it was hard to sort of find sponsors. And now, like, does anyone know, like, the holy grail? Like, what's a good amount of listeners that gets people interested in actually sponsoring your program? Like, is there a rough idea? So that seems like that could be an ascertainable goal. Like, I want to get to X listeners per.
Well, it's very dependent on who the audience is. You know, if your audience is brain surgeons, there's only so many of them in the entire country, so a podcast against 3 of them could be extremely powerful. You know, a more generic story,
Yeah,
you know,
that's great.
there isn't a person in this world, well, maybe now, I always used to say this, I might change this, you know. Boy, I never thought about this. I always used to say nobody in this room would be upset if their audience was only one, if that audience was the President of the United States. You know, and so, see, it might change now. But the fact of the matter is the podcast report helps me get clients.
Yeah.
So I have a very tiny audience, really relatively, but my CPM is in the thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas opposed to a traditional, you know, auditory podcast, might, you know, CPM might be 20. So however, numbers. Most agencies won't put an ad on you unless you have more than 2,000, and those are the small ones.
2,000 downloads
2,000 downloads per episode.
per episode.
Most people want, most network type situations want 5, like you hear here, but those are more the generic inserts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
That's
just a rough idea. It's
Yeah.
understandable.
But so 2 is the bare minimum for pretty much anybody, and anybody in the network space is asking for 5. And then many of them are expecting growth in the network, and many will. If the growth doesn't happen, you're gone in a year.
Yeah.
So since we're on kind of the hybrid of the sponsorship and marketing, you know, the marketing for the purpose of becoming valuable enough for the thing to, you know, sustain itself or otherwise. In my case, I had a sponsor before I even started in Concordia University, which started because I was looking for a place to record. They had a studio, which is basically just a really quiet room. And they're known for their postgraduate teaching college, the School of Education. So it's a joint, so they're not giving me money, they're giving me a place to record, and they are a promotional partner. So they're gonna promote my show to their alumni and faculty. So that gives me a platform to be able to say it's authentic, it's endorsed, there's an audience kind of built into the relationship, and we're starting at 0, but I'm also giving them something razzle dazzle, you know, future-y, whatever. So it was sort of, you know, a lucky opportunity, but something to think about is if your show relates to another company that would be a good marketing partner, then you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone early on.
And just a clarification, when I heard marketing and I wrote down one of the marketing slips, for me it's about growing the audience, it's not about monetizing the show.
Right.
The way we monetize our show is, you know, we've begun to sell information products, and our sponsor is us, and we talk about our products. We just launched a course this month called Hack the Hidden Job Market, and when we launched the podcast a year ago, it was the idea that in the second half of 2016, we would create digital products that we would sell to our audience. We wanted to position ourselves as an authority on job hunting and career management, and so we wanted to create it and grow our audience as we did it. So we're doing well in terms of audience growth, but I've seen some things that have really grown our audience fast, and other things that haven't worked. I think the thing that seems to have worked really well in the last 3 months is getting on other podcasts about careers, and we saw our downloads, they were sort of plateaued in the summer at 11,000 a month, and now we're hitting 16,000, 17,000 a month after we've been on these shows. So I'm hungry for ideas like that. That's what I'm looking for, and sponsorships of our show. You know, Paul, you know more about it than I think than many people. Is you can make hundreds of dollars a month as a sponsor on most shows like the one I'm producing, but I think the real money is in selling either your consulting services or your digital products.
Well, the money is wherever you want it to be.
Yeah.
You know, the problem is when if you go into it wanting to sell your own stuff,
Yeah.
then you only worry about people who buy your stuff.
Right.
If you want to go into it selling traditional ad inserts, you want a crazy amount of downloads.
Right.
You know, and you know, it can be whatever you want it to be. It just has to be what it is, and then you have to go for it.
Yeah.
You know, I think it just mathematically is easier to really serve a small audience well,
Yeah.
and profit from that than trying to gain, you know, a massive audience and make up for it in volume. You know, but it's obviously hard for a science fiction podcast to
Yeah.
to find a niche. So therein is the problem.
But in my case, one of my proposed end games has been turning this from what is essentially a very fun hobby,
Right.
which is really where I'm at right now,
Yeah.
to, you know, my website is Exoplanetary Media. So turning this into a media company that creates content like this, perhaps not just for myself, but for others. And that could be one way that this becomes sort of a calling card, a very niche sort of thing, but somebody might want something like this too. There's a thousand reasons why someone might want something like this. You know, whether it is to add something different to their network or what.
And I totally agree that there's 1,000 reasons. The thing is, the luck of throwing this out there and hoping one of the 1,000 gather might not be as strategic as here are the 5 that I'm going for.
Yeah.
You know, did anybody ever see back when it was 3 or 4 years ago there was that Dear J.J. Abrams video? Did you see that? Sincerely Truman produced that. So basically, the new Star Wars was going to come out, and Sincerely Truman did this video, aimed to be viral, to basically say, Dear J.J., don't screw this up. And I was going for a presentation there, and I had done the research, and they were about to hit some number. Maybe it was 5 million. I don't remember what it was. But I asked that, hey, you're at this, and you can turn over today. Is it like a party? He goes, oh, or are we going to turn over? I go, what, you don't know? He goes, no, I don't really know. I go, what, how do you not know? He goes, well, the video worked. Oh, what do you mean? He goes, well, JJ called. Like, they're done. Like, the whole purpose of that video was to get JJ to call. You know, and at that point, it's just numbers, like let's get to work. We got the gig. And I think what happens with podcasters sometimes is, first of all, if you're just having fun, have fun. You know, but like, there's 100 ways I can make money. One of them's bound to work. That's just bad odds.
It's like you're boiling the ocean. You've got 1,000 different possibilities. You're going to try all 1,000. You don't have the energy.
Yeah, exactly. And you spoke specifically to
You've got to pick your pond and find out which ones are going to work for you.
Right.
So back to specific tactics, I think there's some stuff worth throwing out there, and it's going to be different for different topics. But Reddit has been a blessing and a curse for me. You know, it's really easy to find like-minded people that are interested in that topic, but everybody hates a self-promoter. And you don't have signatures or something where you can just be ever present with your thing. And so, I've been able to get away with one announcement. Hey guys, I'm doing this thing. Check it out. But you can't do that every day. It's not a sustainable thing. What other go-to strategies? I'd love the idea of appearing on other shows. Anybody else?
Well, in addition to that, are there presentations or that you could give at whether they're like smaller conferences or even interviews with other media where it's very similar to appearing on podcasts, but whether it's
One of the
live
things,
speaking or
one of the things I was talking about with Mac is that there's no shortage of gatherings for any subject matter. In my case, a science fiction convention or just an actual theatrical production would be an ideal way to gear people toward it. But in financial planning or whatever topic you're thinking of, there's always some sort of conference going on somewhere. And it's just a matter of knowing who to email and saying, hey, do you want a guest?
or even taking the content that you have and making like a top 10 of the worst things you can do in your job search, promoting that.
Clickbait.
Yeah. But
It's funny. It's funny you say the worst things. That gets more hits than the best things.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's also a value in bringing people on who host other podcasts if it fits with your content. Like a guest spot from someone, where it's a mutual benefit where. People like to be interviewed, and then also if they like your show, they'll talk it up on their show or what have you.
It's that cross collaboration. Like a lot of the podcasts I listen to, it seems like there's a small group of people and they just transfer, back and forth. But their audiences, because it's similar topics or a similar vibe, they build each other's audiences a lot.
These are good ideas, and as you all talk, and I just reflect back to Paul's point about what's your goal, because maybe you just want to reach an audience of one, and the goals for our show, I run a website called maxlist.org, and we get about 80,000 visitors a month because of a job board, 400 listings. And I know from annual surveys of readers that 90% of the people who come are inside Oregon or Southwest Washington. An unexpected benefit of the podcast has been, we know from Libsyn that 85% of our downloads are from outside of Oregon. So we've grown this national audience, which will benefit as we offer these digital products. But back to Paul's point about the goal, when I think about the goal, it's we want to establish relationships with potential affiliate partners in our career space, and those generally are people like us who have some kind of digital presence, and they're selling courses or consulting services, but there are revenue possibilities through affiliate relationships. And so we've been pretty strategic about identifying and reaching out to those people and bringing them on as guests, and that's sort of the first step. And when we do that, it helps grow our national audience, which is really our second goal for the show. And the third has been just to establish us as a credible authority on job hunting and career management nationally. And as I reflect on what you all are saying, it's not really about the numbers; it's about the quality of the relationships and the value of those relationships.
I mean, it could be about the numbers. It depends on what you
It
want.
depends on the model. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, personally, when I produce stuff, I want listeners. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't want thousands, like multi-thousands, but I, want
But
more.
and I respect that,
So-
but to what end? What is the
Yeah, exactly.
How will
Just-
those listeners help your broader strategic goals for your
Well, it's
business
about
or
the
your show?
content, what do you want? You want to share something with people, and so ultimately, so I mean, that's just one take,
Yeah.
But obviously, like if you're going for one, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think there's also value in.
I think another thing that you have to kind of reconcile at some point, I've been doing the show for about 3 years now, and then your goals will shift. They will absolutely change.
Yeah.
We started off wanting to do one of those shows. I do a video game podcast where we talk about the kind of normal, what's happening in the game space, but the kind of mission is to spotlight people of color in the industry. So there's a social activism side to that conversation that we have, but also that has changed the goals a lot. We have a lot of folks who the industry is not necessarily privy or ready for that conversation yet, so it's moved the goalpost a lot. So we wanted to do this change the world movement first, have the conversation, and that's not going to happen. That's fine. And that's cool. The secondary part of that is we want more access, right? So being able to have the conversation, and then, like you said, kind of bridge build to affiliates, to PR firms, to game companies, to all those sections has helped us kind of grow because they know that the conversation is necessary to the space. So going back to the idea of, how many people do you want? As many as you can get. At least that's been for us. Is the conversation relevant? That's the thing that is always going to be a part of any podcast that you find out.
Do you guys have like a standard, like the 4 pillars of marketing? Like every show you do X kind of a rhythm with it?
It's changed a lot because it's a lot of guerrilla marketing, right? Where it's like most of my week is on social media, spreading the word, sharing what we do, giving links to people about the show. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
What's your name and what's the name of the podcast?
Oh, the name of the show is I'm Khalif. I'm sorry, Khalif Adams. And the name of the show is Spawn on Me.
Spawn on Me.
So it is a lot of get up in the morning, check the feed, see what's going on, see if people listen to it, share out the links, during the week. We record on Thursday, share it on the Tuesday, and then from Tuesday on till next Tuesday, we're sharing the episode on all the channels that you can possibly think of.
Do you share the same link again and again, like on Twitter? Could you, how do you share those links?
It depends. It depends on if we had a guest or not. If we have a guest, we always add that guest in the link, and I tell them during the production of the show when we're having our recording, I'm sorry for your mentions now. I apologize now. I'm going to be mentioning you a lot, so forgive me now. And they're fine with it because again, it's promotion for them, right? It's promotion for them, promotion for their work and stuff. But it's that kind of thing of like the tweets will of course change because Twitter just doesn't let you tweet the same thing over and over again. but also being cognizant of what the tidbits were from your show that you want to kind of share. So, for instance, we had a conversation this week about race in a game in Mafia 3, which is talks about a very interesting take on the 60s culture from the perspective of those black protagonists in this game. And they don't shy away from talking about race, and they use all the epithets that you can think of during the time, right? And how that conversation played itself out. And we had a pretty long show, but there were a bunch of different things in that show that we talked about that you can use in a tweet, you can use in a Facebook message, you can use in an Instagram post, that you can kind of flavor out throughout the week, so that it makes sense to kind of build that conversation, so that people who don't know your show will hopefully see it and they'll understand a little bit about what the topic is for that particular show. But there's a lot of techniques to that.
Let me give you just a hard, easy promotional topic technique off of that. It's very easy. We call it riffing, like in jazz. Okay, and what happens is if you do a show on race in Mafia 3, and you advertise it as you know we did a show about race issues in Mafia 3. Only 2 people care about that. People care about race issues in video games, and people care about Mafia 3. That's a limited world. However, if something inside of that conversation makes it bigger, and I'm going to guess it's bigger than those 2 topics. If something inside the conversation makes it bigger than that, if you talk about that issue, and you make that part of the social media conversation, then what happens is you get people who don't care that it's a podcast, don't care that it's Mafia 3, don't care what not, they just care about the conversation in play. So what we do is instead of, on episode 107, we talk to Christopher about, about storytelling. Christopher, the name of your show again?
Exoplanetary.
Christopher from Exoplanetary about his show, he might get a couple fans who are watching that type of thing. But if I have a quote where he says, I have found tremendous freedom in telling my story, I don't care how big the audience is. If that's what he said during the show, that's a riff. And so we do that quote card. And where we win is, so I don't care how big storytelling is, I find freedom in it, thepodcastreport.com/106. Now what's interesting is you put that on your feed. Pinky here picks it up because he's interested in the concept of freedom. He doesn't even give a crap about my show. But what's interesting, is Trisha's a friend of Pinky's. Trisha sees this graphic riff and goes, "What's the podcast report?" And nobody cares about an episode number. Nobody cares about a host. And it's really funny because I kind of realize, my mom to this day, God bless her, she still believes that she can't listen to my podcast because she doesn't have an Apple. And a couple of things. A, Mom, I'll buy you one. No, I don't want to learn anything new. But so I come home and she has the iHeartRadio app on her Kindle Fire. Okay? I go, Mom, why do you have the iHeartRadio app? It's just, radio told me to. That's several episodes of the show right there. But I go, Mom, I'm on iHeartRadio. And she's, oh, you're on the radio now? I said, no, Mom, actually, no, my podcast. No, son, this is the iHeartRadio app. And fine, Mom, I'm on the radio. Just listen to your son's stuff, And the thing is 2 types of people in this world. Sorry, those who know what a podcast is, those who don't. Okay? Those who know what a podcast is don't care that it's a podcast. Those who don't know what a podcast is, that could represent a problem, like for my mom. And so what happens is if you share a riff that says storytelling sets me free, and Trisha's interested in storytelling, and she goes, well, what is the podcast report /105? And then she goes, and there's a play button. We know what play buttons do. She clicks play. And then at the end of the podcast, I introduce her. I go, hey, we do this every week, and I can send it right to your phone, and here's how you do it. Now I've got an audience that didn't come from somewhere else. Yes?
Oh, I was going to say, I actually face my name's Jeremy. I do a show called Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person. Just something about getting your mom to listen to your show. Half of my aims are counter that, where I do not want similar to the old Onion bit about Area 30 something horrified when mom finds his blog.
Right.
I technically don't want my parents to actually find, they might learn a little bit too many disagreeable things about me
Right.
from my own
Well,
show,
and
but-
just say this isn't a mommy issue. This is just a
Oh, yeah.
if I can
All of mommy.
if I can get
Podcast
her
is a safe space for that.
if I can get her to
That's
realize that the content's available, I can get the whole world to do that. That's
Right.
all. Just to clarify.
Oh no, but I'm not. I'm just.
Yeah.
I think I knew what you were going for, but it was just struck me as kind of like just the interesting contrast because I can get my siblings will listen, but that's about it generation wise for the for people, family members who actually know how I really am in the real world.
I want to. So you said you do Twitter and Instagram.
Yep.
Is there one that's more successful than the other in terms of traction? Do you feel like you
Twitter.
Yeah.
And do you
Okay.
pay to play,
No.
or do you just do? And
I-
what's your following like, just out of curiosity?
We're doing around 6,500 listens a month.
I mean, on your Twitter account.
Oh, Twitter?
Yeah.
2,000+.
Okay.
It's still fairly new.
Yeah.
And then
Just curious how that number actually plays out to.
I mean, it
Push
depends, right? Where it's
Yes.
like our numbers on the actual account are okay. They're not great. That's the next meeting thing. They're okay. Of course, everyone wants them to be better.
Yeah.
But I think the engagement that we see on the account is what to me matters. Is folks are saying, I appreciated this episode. This was a great conversation. You can build off that really well. It's just a matter of like the numbers are going to be the numbers.
Yeah.
And you can tweak that stuff. You can pay to play. You can do all that stuff. But is the engagement good? Is that engagement real?
Yeah.
Through your Twitter followers, are those mostly people that are listening, or what about other people that are also interested in your topics that could be advocates or?
Sorry, I'm trying to turn this thing off. It's like,
You're here.
yeah, I'm here. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Or are you connecting with other people that are kind of thought leaders in the space, and then building conversations and they can be guests on your show?
Oh yeah, I mean it's a great time to be talking about diversity. So we were lucky that there weren't a lot of folks in the gaming space talking about that, so we found a niche. But we're always reaching out to folks who are thought leaders in those spaces and talking to folks who are kind of even on the periphery of those spaces.
Yeah.
Because we have such a cool overlap with the social justice stuff,
Right.
social activism stuff, and games, so that it definitely helps to bridge in other folks who aren't necessarily in gaming, because I think that that's an important conversation to have with folks so that you can build those coalitions and talk about this stuff a little bit.
Does anybody do
So-
any public speaking? Sorry.
Oh, I wanted to talk about, so Instagram,
Yep.
there's the visual component. So how do you sort of accentuate the podcast? I mean, obviously you have the advantage of showing clips of the video games.
Yeah.
Is that, like, what else do you do to sort of build upon that? Because,
Riffing works.
but like
works.
visually, like how do you?
Visually, you do the quote cards.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Dude, Adobe
And the thing is,
Spark-
Instagram doesn't. Adobe Spark's killer.
Adobe Spark is great.
Instagram doesn't necessarily get you the clicks, but what happens is there's that reminder.
Yes.
Oh man, he's got a new episode out. Then you flip over to the podcast app.
Right.
Now you can buy the clicks inside Instagram. We played with that a little bit, but yeah. Quote cards, and then just to the Twitter comment. Twitter won't let you do the same thing every time, but we have riffs on auto repeat.
Right.
They've been going for 3 years.
You can set that stuff up.
Like
You can
quotes
set
that you
stuff up.
just.
Quote
keep
cards from
rehashing.
old episodes, yeah,
Yeah.
and they still get engagement.
Yeah, riffs work. Adobe Spark is something that I've learned in the
Game
past
changer.
2 months.
Yeah.
6 months.
Yeah.
Because we just really kind of started to do the Instagram side of it. Adobe Spark free works so well. It's such a good, easy platform to use.
So
What
if
is Spark?
you, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, real quick, like what is Spark? Spark I actually haven't hit yet. Is it just a quick image thing, or?
So basically, image, animation, text. So you
Oh,
combine
okay.
the three, pushes it out to whatever your channel's on.
Oh.
And there have been products that have done that before.
Right.
Where Spark came into play was make an Instagram size, click a button, resizes it Facebook size, click a button, resizes it Pinterest size.
Okay.
So you get one good scheme, quote, and sometimes it isn't always perfect, but
Edit
we
that out.
produce 3 a lot faster than you could before.
Oh, yeah, seriously. I had like 6 different apps to try to get those things
Yeah.
together before, and now it's like one quick thing that I can kind of put together now.
Okay, cool. So it's not just like fighting through GIMP for 4 hours or something.
Exactly.
Yep.
And just a little Spark hack, a lot of people don't realize this, it puts Adobe Spark in the bottom right-hand corner of your images. If you share Spark once with a friend, it takes it away.
Yep.
So you don't have to promote Spark if you're promoting your show.
You just share it once and it's gone?
So everyone share it to each other now.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And I've heard rumors that you can
Oh,
share it and not even
share
send a share,
Adobe Spark.
and that still works too.
Yeah, it pops it up, and then if you just close it out,
Yeah.
then it still does it. the riffing thing, perfect. It totally worked. You were saying something about public speaking.
Yeah, is anybody, that's my ulterior motive is to have a platform to go do this thing sort of live.
Helps.
And being in a niche, I'm going to be able to say I have the #1 podcast on the role of VR in education because it's literally the only one.
I haven't even started yet, and this is the one.
You market the hell out of that. That's real, though. That's real.
I'll tell you, I was at an event, and Ariana Huffington was speaking. And everybody wants to get on HuffPo. You know, and everybody was sucking up to her, and it was just crazy. And this woman in the back goes, "Can I interview you on my podcast?" And her eyes got big, and you know, because podcasts are sexy right now. And Ariana, she does the, you know, points to her assistant, points to that person, very Devil Wears Prada kind of moment. But because you have a podcast, yeah, you can leverage that, and you know, from the #1 podcast about X. And can I give you here's the cool tip. Offer to record an episode of your show live. Yes. They love that. I'd like to record an episode of X live at your event, and then it's not just, you know, we got a keynote. Now we got a live studio taping, and it just drives people crazy.
That's great. Is anybody else doing public speaking at all? Mac, I got to thank you. You guys really have a reason to you know, speak to the thing that people need to know, you know?
Yeah, no, we organize events locally. We do 8 a month, or 8 a year rather, and we generally sell about 150 to 200 tickets.
What's the price point?
Yeah, we have early bird at 20, and then it goes up to 25.
Okay.
And we found that
Is it a profit center, or is all that just food?
we get sponsors,
building.
so
Okay.
they provide the space, the food, then we get 100% of the gate.
Nice.
And then and then we get people into our system.
Yeah.
And we,
Help me find a job.
What about when you do that? Do you also do would you also do your own job fair where you have sponsors or like?
We don't. So what we do live stream the event, and then we record. We take that recording, and we're trying to get thoughtful about how we use that content and repurpose it. But about 90% of our revenue comes from job listings right now, and what we want to do in the next 3 to 5 years is create an education and training company, and events are part of that, as well as digital products, and like the online courses. So we did 2 courses this year. We're going to do 2 more next year, and just keep building this catalog of content that we can continue to sell people.
When you record that, do you make a podcast as well as YouTube, or what kind of different platforms do you?
We're still experimenting. We've done it about 6 times where we've live streamed it. We're using Facebook Live.
Okay.
And then we've always gotten transcripts of our podcasts. It's been a year now. We do weekly shows. And I want to, this year has been about getting the format down, the production process and the strategy. And next year is about how do we repurpose this content in order into things that both we can sell people and that we can use to entice people to begin a relationship with us, so we can eventually serve them by selling them products and services.
Excellent.
I don't know if anybody's done this with the one concept I'm working on with a TV show producer. They're trying to get sponsor dollars. They're still growing their audience from a very small number, and it doesn't make sense. You know, your CPM. It doesn't make sense to charge a whole bunch of money if you don't have a whole bunch of listeners.
Yeah.
So we're taking some of the sponsorship amount and turning that back around into an ad campaign for the show itself. So it's almost like a spokesman kind of a thing. But you know, if we got say $5,000 for a brand, we might spend $2,000 in advertising jointly with that brand in promotion of both the show and the brand.
Mm-hmm.
So that way there's a little more of a guaranteed reach. People may or may not listen to the show, but they're going to see the name, and we're going to make sure that it gets in front of them. Just a thought. I haven't actually done that, but it's
What do you think about spending those ad dollars on?
That's a good question. I don't know where the best place for a podcast would be. I don't know if AdWords is the way to go or not. Promoted posts on Twitter I could see. Reddit is a secret weapon for advertisers. it doesn't work nearly as sophisticated a way as AdWords, but it's just sheer tonnage.
Yeah.
I have, in my former life, I was a marketer, and John Tesh was a client. He's got a national radio show, and we would do the quote, you know, it's like, whatever, you know, 3 love tips, whatever. And Reddit, just paid ads on Reddit, like homepage in the thousands and thousands of clicks, and you don't pay per click, you just pay to be there. So, at least you did last time I was there, so. We were trying, I don't know if it'll work, but, you know, podcasts are an interesting creature.
I was just looking up, just kind of idly looking at the App Store, turns out, yeah, Adobe Spark it has like 3 apps that you can run straight off your phone.
Yeah.
Wow. I was like, hey, that's handy.
I'm curious from people around the table, other tactical tips like quote cards that you found have been good for both engagement or audience growth?
Good question.
Well, I'll tell you, I have done close to 24 #1 runs on iTunes right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the #1 runs on iTunes are all about getting people to click subscribe.
Right.
So I have a lot of experience getting people to click subscribe. And subscribers are always better than one-offs.
Because then they download it automatically without
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
having to listen to it.
Yeah, and every week.
Right,
Like
yeah.
that's the key.
Yeah.
I had a client who we took to #4 in all of iTunes, and it was about a 6-month follow-up, and I was looking like every Tuesday she was, you know, and I'm looking like, what is she doing on Tuesday? You know, nothing. She was doing nothing on Tuesdays, you know, and you know, so I said, hey, I just want to make sure that you're not doing anything to promote your show. That's just the subscribers. And it was funny because she just forwarded it on to her people, which she should have. And then her people thought I was calling them lazy, so I got to get all these emails back about how hard they were trying. You're like, no, it just works. And so anyway, subscribes is the action. So here's how you get subscribes. There's only one way to get subscribed. Well, statistically speaking, there's one way to get subscribes, and that's tell people to subscribe. No,
Get this.
It's very important, you know. So this client I took #4, okay, all iTunes. Guy comes to me, got a bit of a rainmaker reputation at that point. Guy comes to me and says, "I got 4 times your audience. Can you give me #1?" Absolutely. And this guy had a tech-savvy audience, blog-centric, new media focused. I mean, there's no way this could go wrong. His message was, homie's got a podcast, you know, and his message was come on my blog and click the play button. We got 4.5 times as many downloads as my #4 got over the course of that day, but he only made it to 57 in all of iTunes because the message wasn't subscribe. So, how do you get people to subscribe? You tell them to subscribe. You tell them it's important to subscribe. And what happens sometimes in the podcasting space is we're so giving that we don't even necessarily tell them what the best service is.
Right.
You know, the message is not, I have a podcast. The message is I can send this to your phone every single week if you do this. That's what people like, and that's what people care about. So you ask techniques. We do really, really, really well when somebody with a lot of email, people, legit, not spammers, but people with legitimate lists, when they tell their audience, subscribe to the show, here's how to do it. And if you make a video that teaches you how to subscribe, that does better. If you have the talent, say, this is the phone, go here, zoom in on the phone, show the subscribe button, you know, that does best. And it's getting them to click subscribe. And so what happens is you get a massive guest. And if the massive guest says, I was on Pinky's show, that's the end of the story. Yeah, you're on Pinky's show. I might go click play. But if the message was, I was on Pinky's show, you should subscribe to it, that changes the game. And here's the cool part. Guests are 3 things. They're lazy, they're selfish, and they're right. Okay? So here's the deal. If you ask them, will you promote the show? They'll send out, I was on Pinky's show. If you pre-write the email letter for their newsletter that tells them to click subscribe, they'll cut and paste that and they'll put that in their newsletter.
With the wording that says, can you please paste this?
Exactly. Well, you don't even need that. You don't even need that because they're lazy themselves. Of course, you do need a pointing arrow that flashes on and off. But you make it really, really, really easy. You make a quote card for them to put on the social. You know, subscribe to the show. And but subscribes wins every time. And I'll take one subscriber over 50 downloads any day.
I have a question for listeners who are on Android. What do you tell them to do to subscribe?
Well, you have to do. This is not a religious war. This is a numbers issue. Okay. Statistically speaking, And unfortunately, you say this in front of a bunch of podcasters, and they're the ones who break the statistic. Statistically speaking, Android users are people who don't want to pay for their smartphone, and iOS users are people who do want to pay for their smartphone. So, iOS users expect their phones to do things. Android users, statistically speaking, are generally surprised when their phone does things. So the message is very different. You know, the message is not what's the best podcast client for Android, because they all suck. Okay, with that said, then the best one is Pocket Casts.
Is what?
Pocket Casts.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah,
one
that's
of the
what I
main
use.
reasons why Pocket Cast is so fantastic is because the iPhone version and the Android version look exactly alike. And sometimes if you're teaching an audience how to use it, you can show it once and teach both. Because, well, that's the other religious war in this country that we won't talk about, you know, the Android iOS thing. And so, so the message for Android users is every smartphone in this room can get this content delivered on a weekly basis. Don't say the word podcast. Those who know what it is don't care. Those who don't know what it is get confused. You know, the message is smartphone. The new Google implementation of podcasts inside of Google Music is okay, and it's certainly Google-centric, but the problem is if he has an Android and he has an iOS device and I offer a click, it will result in an error on his iOS device, which is a mess. But so the message is, do this so that you can get these messages delivered to your phone every day, and then go from there. And then last but not least, take a deep breath and realize that that's 10% of your audience.
So you don't, basically what you sounds like what you're saying is you don't even worry about you just tell them to subscribe on iTunes and figure that the Android users will figure it out, or you're not?
Depends what the goal is. I was at an event, and I don't want to monopolize, so please tell me if I'm talking too much. I was at an event, we were trying to do a #1 run, you know, and this woman comes up to me with her iPhone and with her iPad in one hand and her Android in the other hand. She goes, I can't subscribe on my Android phone. I go, no, but you can subscribe on your iPad. Oh, okay. And she subscribes. And the fact of the matter is the iPad was the one she was using for media, you know, because she was willing to pay for that device. So the message is subscribe. Realize that 10 people in the room, only one of them has an Android phone, and you just got to look, statistically speaking, sending them right to iTunes as opposed to sending them to a page where they fork. It's just you're gonna do better if you send them right to iTunes,
Right.
Statistically speaking. Now, who your audience is, where they're going, if it's you know, inner city kids who've all been given a smartphone by the school, it's not going to be iOS. You know, if it's you know, so you have to be really careful with that. But the message is subscribe, and just realize what percentage Android really plays. If you have to, I was in an audience once where I was told, everybody, period, and I taught Pocket Casts. I said, here's a great podcast app that works on any smartphone in this audience, and I kind of lied because it doesn't work on BlackBerry, and there are like four left in the country, so thank goodness none of them were in the room. But that's how you teach. 4 BlackBerries, 2 Microsoft phones.
Can we talk about how you can actually get an accurate idea of what your audience is? So talking about like a podcast hosting situation, or I mean, because it's related. Because if you don't know,
Who is consuming, or who is your ideal consumer? Because those are 2 different audiences.
who's consuming,
Okay.
like how many, where they are. So getting analytics basically.
Yeah, the stats, I
Right?
guess.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that.
Does that help with the marketing, or are we getting off topic? Chris? I'm gonna give it to you.
I think it's I mean, we've got about 15 minutes, so I think we've covered it.
Podcasting has severe limitations. And I've been on record for the last 10 years that podcast doesn't need fixing. You know, you just need, you know, podcasting's limitations, podcasting's strength. You know, and the fact that an Android user can get my show without having to have any special software like that is powerful. I mean, that's the power of podcasting. So we only know what we know. We know how many people downloaded, we know where they downloaded from, and we know what device they downloaded from.
That's it.
That's it, that's all we got. Now, I did a podcast once, I'm not gonna say which one it was, I'm not gonna say what episode it was. But at the end of the show, I said, email me with this keyword, and I will send you a $100 gift card for Amazon. And my idea was the second somebody did that, I would take it down and re-edit it and put it back up. To this day,
No one?
you know, about 1,800 downloads of that episode. This day, nobody's emailed me yet. Wow. Now, I mentioned that on a show. Somebody reached out on Twitter and said, well, I actually heard that. I just thought there's no way I would have been the first. You know, and I'm willing to pay it a couple of times because it's a great story to tell. But And so consumption all the way through the end. But see, here's where it gets interesting. Mac sells product, okay? Mac gets 5,000 downloads an episode, and he sells 10 products. I'm just making up numbers here, okay? Now Mac knows that all he has to do is get 5,000 downloads to sell 10 product, or he has to do 500 downloads to sell one product. And if he knows that his profit off of one product is $50, he knows if he can buy a download for 10 cents or less, he's ahead of the game. That's why I love CPA advertising and podcasting. If you get them to take an action, you can track that. And that can be anything from share it with a friend. It doesn't have to be financially gain. You signing up for a newsletter. You know, it could be a number of things. I've got a client right now who their value of an email address, statistically speaking, evened out about everything, is worth about $25. And right now, was that?
For one email address?
One email address to their target audience, and their shows to, the only people who would give the email address are people who are in their target audience. So right now, we're getting, the podcast model is, it's the first 27 minutes of a conversation. So it's a good, we might actually got the idea from Taste of Portland. Like, I'm not putting a tiny bite of a donut in your mouth and saying, you know, come to pay the rest. You know, they're getting a nugget, they're getting a really good chunk of info. You know, they're getting a plate, but they're not getting the full meal. And if they want the full meal, they have to go to the website to sign up for the rest of the interview. And we edit it in such a way that we don't stop at mid-sentence or anything like that. It serves them. 6% of all downloads, every 100 people who download, we get 6 email addresses. And remember, the 6 email addresses were $25, which is $150. So now we got a $150 budget for 1,000 downloads, which we can do.
And you promote it through the.
We're going to start buying ads. The show's on iTunes, the show's everywhere.
But I mean, where do you buy that ad?
Well, now that we know the value, that was your question. Now that we know the value, we'll buy anywhere that we can buy for less than $1. You know, so we're going to try Facebook, we're going to try Twitter, we're going to try Instagram. Mental note, we're going to try Reddit. Although I don't think the audience is there, but I'm going to try it. But the cool thing is we have that number.
Everything.
Yeah.
My
I've got a customer who.
My
go ahead.
question's a little more basic, actually,
Right.
just like literally.
Well, they'll let you know how many downloaded, what device they downloaded on, and where they downloaded from.
Right.
That's all you got.
I'd like to hear maybe from people that are actually producing, like where are you getting your numbers of how many downloads you're getting concretely, like what platform are you using?
Libsyn.
I pay a couple extra bucks every month on Libsyn, and they give me a pretty solid idea of how many I'm getting. I'm right now I'm about 100 listeners an episode, but that also increases every new episode that comes out.
Yeah,
The first episode gets more.
Yep.
Gets more listens. So.
But Libsyn.
Libsyn.
SoundCloud.
Libsyn.
Yeah, I use SoundCloud, and then we also have on the web development podcast that I do, we have a WordPress plugin called Easy.
EasyS3.
Yeah.
Maybe. I
Okay.
think it's called Easy
Easy
podcasting plugin.
Oh, okay.
But it's free, and actually the analytics on that have been as good as what I've gotten on SoundCloud.
Remember that
or the other
plugin though
podcasts,
is
so.
only for people who click play, not people who download the show.
Well, it all comes through the RSS feed, so it's counting all the downloads. that
Okay, so
go
it
to the
writes
different
the.
platforms.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
so I found that to be really nice, and it's free, and it's really good. So
People that
I don't
download,
know.
do they ever forward that or email it to somebody else?
They could.
And then you don't get those numbers.
No.
It's probably, I imagine, be really tiny.
Yeah, I mean the impetus to do that isn't really there, I don't think.
So there's no analytics on how long people listen to your show.
Now there are Stitcher represents across my shows maybe 3% of all listening. Stitcher you can get some numbers,
Okay.
but Stitcher's a very specific demographic. But no, you don't get. I mean, that's the whole nature of MP3. That's the whole
Yeah.
freedom of what we delivered is you just don't get that.
Yeah.
And then there are players on the site that will measure that. SoundCloud will do some stuff for you, but it's all the web-based stuff, not the drive timers.
I'll offer that similar to SoundCloud. I'm hearing a lot of anecdotal evidence from other podcasters about posting it on YouTube. Posting it on YouTube as a podcast with like their logo or and that's something I've played with. I haven't done it yet, but putting it on as many formats as possible, you have more audiences. The advantage of something like YouTube is that YouTube can go more viral than something like SoundCloud or even iTunes sometimes, depending on what you're presenting. If you're presenting a clip, you can perhaps draw more people with that. If you're presenting the entire episode, you got a little picture on the bottom that tells you exactly how many people have listened to it.
And a tracker for how long they listen.
Exactly.
And transcription.
Real quick thing, 'cause I know this session is ending soon. I would love to hear, before the day is out, conversations about how to build your email list. Because that's a thing that I'm terrible at and have not figured out at all.
I would love to hear that too, because I feel like we've plateaued it. The other thing I'd love to hear, I know we're going to break in a few minutes, is am I making the right ass of my guests in terms of promotion? You know, right now we're providing them with a piece of artwork and a tweet, I think, but what else should we ask them to do? And what's been working for other people?
Yeah, I have a special advantage in that there are 3 to 5 self-promoting actors. each of whom have social media audiences, and that. And I don't think I've even really scratched the surface with that because the nice thing is that there's not the same actors every single episode, so they'll draw people to the whole shebang as opposed to that.
But to Paul's point, I think if you make it easy for people by providing them the right stuff and make it easy for them to say yes, they'll do it.
Also,
They'll be smart students.
coordinating it with them also puts them on a timeline. Like, I worked for a storytelling app, and that was huge. Just being like, even though we didn't really have a schedule, like, okay, we'll put you into our schedule. How about 10 on Tuesday? They're like, no, this time's better for my audience. And so working with them, like if you can line up with key influencers or whatever in your space, and then actually locking them into a time, then it really makes it feel like it's coordinated.
In terms of
and
their
they
online
actually do
promotion,
it.
We ask people whenever we have guests on that once they see our tweet out, because we'll at them. Reshare it, or say something after that, and that seems to work for us.
And then just finding influencers in your space, I think, is key. And people are, have big egos and like to have their butts kissed. So it's nice if you can just really honor them, and then they'll, like make a big deal out of them on your podcast or whatever.
It's only worked twice for us, but we offer it every time we go. And if you'd like, just give us your login password and we'll run it for you. And I don't know if I'd ever do that, but but some have, and it's been good.
Yeah, even the 2 times. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Easy email.
Oh my goodness.
I got one more quick idea in terms of building the email list. Contests always work well for that, but you can end up with a spammy or too general a list, so you have to be careful about it.
What kind of contests have you run? Or have you seen
Well, what do you have to give away, Mac?
Coffee mugs, books.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think in your case, the a raffle of sorts, or just a straight sweepstakes that says, we're going to give away, the whole shooting match this week to one person. Enter to our website. What works even better than that is a guaranteed value with a possible grand prize. So everybody that comes to our site is going to get $5 off their next purchase, and somebody's going to win it all. Or if you have the budget, if you know that every listener or every email is worth $25 to you, then give them $5. That. So however that financial equation works, people like stuff.
I've been just doing an ongoing contest saying as soon as I get 50 pictures of people listening to my podcast, we're going to pick one and send them a coffee mug. That's basically it.
Part of the genius of what you're doing is the only people who want a coffee mug are listeners to your show. Well, I've seen people have contests for, a free iPad, and suddenly they're surprised that nobody buys their stuff. But no, people wanted a free iPad. Everybody wants a free iPad. People want your show, and that's what's awesome. So always make the prize relevant only to the audience that you're looking for, or else you're just getting a bunch of names.
It's something we mentioned. I wanted to talk about the audio hyperlinks, because you mentioned that there's not much in the analytics side with the they just developed this audio hyperlink technology. If that's embedded into the podcasts, and if the people have the app running in the background, you end up getting the analytics of where they are when they heard it, what they heard, and if you embed hyperlinks throughout your message, there's different things that can pop up. Like if you're trying to sell another product, if you want to get an email address, if you want to get something else, then they end up with a screen that looks like this. It's a headline and image and 3 links, and the links can be subscribe or buy or calendar or website or phone number or LinkedIn account or whatever you want.
Okay.
So then you get the analytics that you couldn't get before.
Do we know what the next session is?
We have that written down, or we'll have to go back to the room.
I didn't take that.